Well, Britain's exit from the European Union is officially underway after British Prime Minister Theresa May this week triggered Article 50 to begin the process of disengagement with the EU. Now, Britain's decision to leave the trading bloc has been divisive, but it calls attention to whether globalization has actually been good for communities. Now, in Bristol, a group of citizens, including Brexit opponents, is trying to stop the flow of money and jobs out of the city. VOA Europe correspondent Luis Ramirez has our story.
There is very little that Britons agree on when it comes to Brexit, but everyone agrees that ending 4 decades of integration with Europe will be a messy process.
The effect of European Union law is all pervasive, from constitutional level questions to the regulation of bananas and cucumbers at the bottom end of the spectrum. So it is a mammoth task that will not be negotiated within 2 years. It will take a decade or decades to give full effect to EU withdrawal.
The formal withdrawal will take time. In Bristol, the strike against globalism and homogeneity began 5 years ago with the launching of the Bristol pound, a currency whose value is equal to the pound sterling but can only be spent in the city. For local businesses like this non-profit bike repair shop and cafe, it is about keeping money in the local economy and quality of life.
And joining us now to talk about how this messy divorce is likely to impact London, European trade, as well as the larger global economy, we are joined from our London studio by VOA European correspondent and London bureau chief Luis Ramirez, who filed that report for us, and right here in Washington by VOA senior economics editor Jim Randle, my business colleague. Thank you very much for joining us both. Luis, so I want to talk about your the story you just did. So in Bristol, which I believe is west of London, merchants there want consumers to buy local. Isn't that essentially what Brexit aims to do? Buy British goods and fewer European products? Isn't that basically it?
That's pretty much the spirit, or a large part of the spirit behind Brexit, taking back control, a statement against globalism and homogeneity.
So Jim, how does this affect bananas and cucumbers being sold in London? I mean, how does this affect the European single market?
The biggest thing that is going to affect the economy is, as Ben Bernanke, the former Fed chief, said, is years of tremendous uncertainty. And if lenders, company managers and so forth, if they're not certain about the outcome, they're not certain about the background of what's going on economically, they're reluctant. They're either not going to lend money or they're going to lend money at higher interest rates. And this lack of lending, this lack of economic activity tends to slow down the whole economy. A slower economy means fewer jobs and more problems.
So the problem there is essentially a departure from the status quo.
Exactly. A future uncertainty, and the uncertainties just keep piling on. We have a new administration in Washington that has said it's less interested in international affairs, and they got elected on taking a hard line on trade. We're looking at elections in in France and Germany, and the outcome of that is going to be interesting. More and more uncertain.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that for sure, about the impact on other countries, Jim. But I want to get Luis back in this. So, Luis, those bonds between Europe and Britain that we once thought were unbreakable, that's no longer the case. So tell us about Article 50. What happens once Article 50 is invoked?
Well, Article 50 is the part of the provision in the Lisbon Treaty that lets countries take the off-ramp, if you would, get out of the EU. No one's ever done it before. A very lengthy process that, as my report said, is not really going to be completed in a matter of 2 years. We're talking about something like 39,000 19,000 laws that have to be either absorbed or revoked. Yes, governing everything, child safety seats, but really the most important issue is immigration, the flow of people. We've got 3.3 million EU citizens living in the UK, and the big question is now, what is their fate? Are they going to be told to go home, or are they going to be allowed to stay? Very likely they will be allowed to stay. The Prime Minister, Theresa May, has said that Britain wants to remain an open country. Of course, the aim is, according to her in the draft that's been presented, the white paper, it's an early priority to discuss this, to see what's going to happen to them. What we do know is that what Britain is going to want from here on is more skilled laborers rather than some of the low-skilled labor that's been coming.
Jim Randle, I do hear the argument that they want to be more open, but I get the sense that this is a way to sort of keep Great Britain, a little bit closed.
Clearly, immigration
was
one of the worries that drove the Brexit vote. That's that's going to be a problem because there's huge numbers of citizens of both sides in both places. That's going to be interesting working out. The other thing that was the drive to deregulate, the feeling by people who voted in favor of Brexit that there was too much regulation from Brussels, that these out-of-touch bureaucrats were putting regulations, as Luis said, on baby seats and bananas and whatnot. But going forward, it's kind of hard to figure out, will they be able to slash this regulation? Because if as they haggle back and forth with the rest of the EU over the terms of trade in the future, the EU is not going to be happy to let Britain slash regulation and give an advantage to British exporters over their local companies, and so that's going to be a tough negotiation.
So, along with the uncertainty, there's more red tape. Essentially, is what we're probably.
Well, they're trying to cut red tape, but there's 2 points of view. There's there's winners and losers. This could be a zero-sum game, and that makes for a tough negotiation.
Right, Luis, I'm running low on time, but I know Scotland voted 62% in favor of staying with Europe. What does this mean for Scotland's future within the United Kingdom?
Well, it brings back the question of whether Scotland should be independent. And of course, we saw a new move now, another milestone reached to perhaps allow a new or call for a new referendum for Scottish independence. Now, the executive there, Nicola Sturgeon, seems to have quite a mandate, considering that of Scotland's 32 voting districts, not one voted to leave the EU.
So it looks like the UK may be getting smaller as we speak. I thank you, Luis Ramirez in London, and Jim Randle right here in Washington. But right now it's time for another quick break. When we come back, another busy week at the White House. We'll try to bring you up to date on some new appointments and some staffing changes that are going on there.